On this Millennial Review, we're going to do a oil change on a 2016 Nissan Sentra. So on the Nissan Sentra, this is going to be the same for any US models from 2013 to now. And the Sentras use a 4-cylinder engine that asks, in the 5,000 or 6-month time range to go ahead and do an oil change. This car's got about 4,600 miles on it, but it's past 6 months old, so it's time for us to do an oil change. What Nissan asks for in this engine is to do a 4¼ quarts of oil of SAE 0W20. So that's a thinner oil, which is definitely designed for some of these high mile per gallon cars. Now, any fully synthetic oil, doesn't really matter what the brand is, as long as it's a name brand, will work just fine. So I've chosen this 0W20 from Mobil 1, which should work great. And Fram, I just picked up one of their oil filters here, which is a pH 6607. That 4-digit number, the 6607, will be the same for just about any brand of oil filter that you choose to do. And these oil filters themselves are the screw-on type. So this is going to be underneath the car. So the other pieces that you'll need to do a good job with this is certainly going to be checking out either some jack stands or some way to lift the car. I'm fortunate enough to borrow a lift today, but everything we do can be done on your own, and it's actually not that hard. So let's get started. Our first step to doing the oil change is going to be going inside the car here, and we want to pull the hood release. As you can see, down by the driver's left knee, you've got your gas release, gas cap rather, and then right here is going to be the hood release. So go ahead and just pull that towards you. Once you've pulled the hood release towards you, we can then go to the front of the car, and just above the Nissan badge, if you look inside, there's actually a small spot with a lever. You're going to pull that to the side, and then you can lift the hood at the same time. You see the lever right there, which connects up with the hook. So the hood release, as you can see, is actually underneath the hood, and it's going to come down to this small little arrow right on the passenger side. Now that we're under the hood, the one thing that I do want to show is just underneath the hood, you can actually see the basically the label that gets put on when it comes to the US, and you'll notice it'll put the engine oil viscosity right there, 0W20. And the first step once we're underneath our engine is to identify a couple of things. So the first is going to be this yellow pole right here is going to be your engine oil. You can actually see it written on there. And when we pull it out at the very bottom, you'll actually see as it kind of bounces around between those two dots that are in the metal dipstick here. That is the range that you want to see your oil level at. As you can see, it's about 3/4 of the way up. No, this is tough with it bouncing around. And that's what kind of that goldish colored oil is on there. So that's exactly what we want to see, as it's important to make sure that your car is not burning oil. And then after we do the oil change, we'll go ahead and recheck that dipstick to make sure that we've put enough in. Now, when we drain oil, it needs some air to be able to drain fully. So before you ever do an oil change, you want to take your oil fill cap, which is right up here. Lefty-loosey, you can unscrew it. It's always good to see whether or not you're burning oil or the engine's running hot, because you can usually see some charred oil and froth kind of on the top there if the engine's in bad shape. But that's going to be the oil fill, and that's right on the top of the engine. Next up, we'll get the car jacked up, get underneath it to show you what to do next. Alright, it's going to be hard to see here, but the front jack point is going to be this square underneath the car. You can see it's got an open kind of box. That's where at the dealer their jack would go in, but anything right on here is going to be just fine to be able to jack the car up. Underneath the rear, you're going to have a jack point right where the trailing arm goes into the bottom of the car, and you can go ahead and jack straight from there. Now that we're underneath the car here, let's go ahead and take a look at the engine. So you can see we're looking at the engine, or rather the underside of the car, from the rear. On the passenger side is going to be your engine. This black piece right there, that is your oil pan. So this is going to be our bolt to remove, which is going to allow us to drain the oil. And then right here is that small oil filter we looked at before, and that's just going to thread off. All right, so the tools that are going to be needed for this job are pretty simple. We need a 14 millimeter socket or a box wrench, but in this case I'm using a 3/8 14 millimeter socket with an adapter, and then a ratchet to be able to take this off. Now, to take the oil filter off, these guys usually by hand you're not able to, so I've got a set of adjustable pliers here. So all of the things needed, including these tools, I'll go ahead and put a link in the description below, but I like to have just a small little table, be able to hold the stuff I'm working on, and then some sort of device to capture the oil. Just a small drain bucket is fine. This I use just because I do have a lift here. So let's go ahead and first loosen up our drain plug, and then once we totally empty that, we can go ahead and take our oil filter off. All right, so we're going to move our little drain into position. Now let's go ahead and go lefty-loosey to open the drain plug. Now keep in mind it's likely to spew just a little bit, so we're going to want to go ahead and try to use our socket to hold on to the drain plug screw, and you want to position the kind of bucket that you're doing. You can actually see the drip coming out is right below the hole, but we want to position the drain spout where when you pull that out, see how the oil is going straight into the middle, and then we've done it properly where we've actually kept the drain plug inside of the socket. That way we don't have to chase it, it doesn't fall into the oil, and now you're just going to want to go ahead and let that drain out. All right, now that it's to just a slight drain, let's go ahead and move our drain catcher over to where it's just kind of spurting out. And now what we want to do is see if we can't get our oil filter to come out. Real pro trick though is to take our new oil filter, we'll go ahead and pop it out of the box here, and we'll take that oil filter, put it aside, and now when we take out the oily one, we can actually throw it straight into the box and try to minimize as much mess as we can. So let's go ahead and see if we can get this oil filter to come out by hand. Sometimes they do. Nope, that's not going to happen. So let's take our lock jaws here, or our adjustable pliers. See if we can't get it to move. And you don't need to worry about damaging the old oil filter. It's just going to get thrown away. There's nothing you can do with it. And the one thing just to keep in mind is that it is going to have oil in it, so you need to make sure the oil catcher is underneath. Take this out. You'll see it'll start to spill. It's okay. That's why we're wearing gloves. Some people will actually use a screwdriver and actually puncture this first, which you can do. But in my case, I typically just take it out. I'm going to drain that oil filter and then throw it right into our box like we said before. Now we've got our new oil filter. We do need to prime just the seal on top. So take a little bit of the oil drip that's happening right from the drain plug. Just grab a little bit more of it. We can actually spread that right onto the gasket. Now this filter is just going to go right on. This is righty-tighty. You don't need to do these too tight. You can actually accomplish this just by hand. So we're going to want to tighten that up the best we can here. Once we got that nice and tight, take one of our shop rags that we put aside, and we want to clean everything off. The reason for this is, of course, we don't want to have extra oil residue, but we want to see, in the next service, whether or not we had any leaks or anything like that. And the best way to know that is to have a clean car to start with. That way you can see if anything is new or not. Now, because our drain plug is finished draining, we can go ahead and take that screw, or the plug rather, this guy right here, and get that started by hand. Now on this particular car, it is a steel oil pan here, but you still want to be careful because there's no reason to over torque this, especially to a point where you can do some damage. So we're going to go ahead, righty-tighty, just a nice snug tighten to that 14 millimeter bolt there. And again, just like before, we can go ahead and take our rag here and wipe the excess off. So now we've gone ahead and we've replaced our oil filter, we've drained our oil. The next step is to go ahead and put oil back into the car. All right, the car is back on the ground now, and remember we had placed the oil fill cap there. That's going to be the oil fill hole. It's on the top of your valve cover on the car. And then we've got the Mobil 1 0W20 motor oil. So in here, this particular jug is 5 quarts. And remember we had saw that it's 4 1/4 quarts is what we're actually looking to put into the car. So what we're gonna go ahead and want to do is, if we see here, we've got 1 quart, 2 quart, 3 quart, 4, and then that's all the way up to 5. The bottle changes a little in size, which is why there's a big gap. We're gonna want to go ahead and go all the way down to the 1 quart here, and then try to split the difference somewhere inside of there. And to make this a little bit easier, go ahead and use a funnel. I'm going to try to free pour this and we'll see what happens. So that's starting to feel relatively light, so let's go ahead and check where we are. With it roughly level, we're right at about a quart left here. So we got to pour just a little bit more in. Take a look at that. Looks a little bit better. Put it down on a level table, and it looks like we're right at about the correct amount. So let's go ahead and just clean up our little bit of overspill and put the cap back on. So after filling the oil, you do want it to get time to go ahead and drain all the way to the bottom of the engine before checking your oil dipstick. But I did pull off just the cover to show you kind of what's underneath the cover. So this is the oil fill that we just went ahead and did. And it's actually quite neat because if you look at it, it's actually a funnel almost on its own. And that goes down into the fill valve on the top of the engine. So we've given a few minutes for the oil to go ahead and drain down into the bottom of the oil pan. Let's go ahead and take our yellow dipstick out. Go ahead and wipe the old oil off because we're going to want to put this in clean to see just where the oil level is. So go ahead and slide that right back into the oil fill. And pull this right back out here. You'll see we're right at the top. The correct amount of oil went into the car, which is a great thing. Let's go ahead, start the car up, and make sure everything runs properly. And with that, we've gone ahead and changed the oil in our Nissan. It's important to go ahead and do the oil change indicator light reset if your car has it, and record down the amount of miles that are on the vehicle when you do the oil change. In this case, it's 46,000 or 4,600 miles rather, and that wants to go into your logbook so you know when to do it next time. And once we have that in our logbook, let's just go ahead and take the car for a drive. Thanks so much for watching this do-it-yourself video on doing your own oil change in your Nissan Sentra. Go ahead and like the video and send me a comment to let me know how it goes. Subscribe for more.